In this lesson, we're going to look at how to write an advantages and disadvantages essay. We'll look at how to write a good introduction and conclusion, and also how to construct our paragraphs using the language of advantages and disadvantages. So first, let's look at the topic. So here in this example, more and more students are choosing to study English abroad. Discuss the advantages and disadvantages of studying English abroad. That is one way we could have an advantages and disadvantage essay. The other way is like this. More and more students are choosing to study English abroad. Studying English abroad has many benefits, but there are also drawbacks, and not everyone is suited to studying abroad. To what extent do you agree or disagree? Again, this is an advantages disadvantage essay, so we need to use that language. Let's look at now at how we could organize the paragraphs. As we saw in lessons 7 and 8, there's a thesis-led approach and an argument-led approach. For the advantages and disadvantages essay, either way is appropriate. For the example of this essay about studying English abroad, we're going to use the thesis-led approach. Now, let's look at some advantages and disadvantages of studying English abroad. And remember, we just want a few advantages and disadvantages because we're going to try to fully develop these ideas. So we don't want a lot of ideas. We'd rather fully develop just a few ideas. We'll come back to these advantages and disadvantages later and look at how to put them into our essay. But first, let's look back at our paragraph organization. So to begin with, we want to introduce the topic and give our opinion. So let's compare a bad example and a good example of an introduction. Here in this bad example, it does use a thesis-led approach, but it is only going to give an opinion about why it's a benefit. It's not going to discuss the advantages and disadvantages of studying in an English-speaking country. And remember, that is the purpose of this essay. It's not just to give an opinion, but it's to discuss the advantages and disadvantages. So this example is inappropriate. However, if we contrast it here with this good example, we can look at what makes it good. So at the beginning, there's a clear introduction of the topic. There is no doubt that an increasing number of students go overseas to learn English. And then it outlines in general terms the advantages and disadvantages of studying English abroad, and these points will be more fully developed in the following paragraphs. It then clearly states the writer's opinion, so it follows the thesis-led approach in stating the opinion in the introduction. So this is what makes it an appropriate introduction for an advantages-disadvantages essay following a thesis-led approach. So now let's turn back to our paragraph organization. We've got a good introduction, so now we're going to go on and discuss some of the advantages. So now let's look back at the advantages we made before, and let's take the first one, fully immersed in the culture, so you have to speak English. So here in our second paragraph, we begin clearly. To begin with, studying English in an English-speaking country has 3 main benefits. Let's take that first point and put it into a well-constructed, complex set of sentences. So here we've done that. And as you can see, we've linked our ideas together and we've given an example. For instance, from morning to night, all conversations are held in English. And then we've talked about what happens as a consequence. So consequently. So we tried to more fully develop this idea. And we're going to do that for each idea in our list. So going back to our list here, for better quality teachers, again, we link it in. So using good linking like secondly, and then we also have a contrast with however. So however, we cannot get the same quality of teacher as easily in our own country. So again, we're using a good range of complex sentences. And finally, for the last point, gaining cultural knowledge can help language skills. Again, we've linked it in. So here we've used thirdly, when students stay in an English-speaking country. And then again, we've given an example and a concluding sentence. Therefore, this experience will be helpful to understand the culture and become a strong backup to being a good English speaker. So we've used a good range of complex sentences to link our ideas together. And as you can see here, we've used a range of linking words and devices. So it's important to use a wide range. And as a result, we've taken those 3 simple ideas and we have a very well constructed paragraph using complex sentences. So looking back at our organization, we're going to do the same for the next paragraph, discuss disadvantages. So again, here we have the disadvantages. Students become homesick. Taking that first idea, now in our third paragraph, talking about the disadvantages, we're going to contrast it with the advantages we had in the second paragraph. So here we introduced the topic. However, there are some considerable drawbacks as well. So that's our contrast. We then take that idea of homesick. The main drawback is when students live overseas, they often become homesick. And then we more fully develop this idea. We give a reason, as they no longer have the direct support network of their family and friends. And then we talk about the consequences of this on their learning. So we've more fully developed this idea. Again, we're going to do that for the second disadvantages. And as you can see here, we've linked it in. So adding to this, it may be a good idea for beginners to start learning English in their own country. And again, we've gone on to develop the reasons why you think this is a good idea. So we're more fully developing the idea. Again, for the last one, the financial burden, so the cost of studying overseas. Another downside is the high cost associated with overseas study. And so again, we've more fully developed this idea. And we've done that using a range of complex sentences. We've also, as you can see here, used a range of linking words and devices, again, different from paragraph 2, the advantages. So again, really good because we're using a wide range. We've also used a wide range of ways to talk about disadvantages, drawbacks, distraction, overwhelming burden, downside, and considerable financial burden. So again, we've used a good range of ways to talk about disadvantages. And as a result, we have a very well constructed paragraph using a range of complex sentences and linking devices. So now finally, we need to have our conclusion, and we're just going to reiterate our opinion. So let's compare and contrast the good conclusion and the bad conclusion. Firstly, looking at the bad conclusion, it's just generic. It doesn't relate specifically to the points talked about in this essay. It could be said about any advantages, disadvantages essay. It just talks in general terms about benefits and drawbacks. However, we want to aim for a high IELTS score. So if we look at the good conclusion, it relates specifically to the 3 benefits discussed: the linguistic, the cultural opportunity, and the quality of teachers. So it sums up these benefits in a concise way, and it restates the opinion using a range of ways to express the opinion, not just using I think. And finally, things to remember for Task 2, Advantages and Disadvantages essay. At the beginning, try to make a plan using an argument-led approach or a thesis-led approach. To see the differences in these 2 approaches, please see Lesson 7 and Lesson 8. Also, you need to try to organize your ideas into logical paragraphs, as you can see here. You also need to use a wide range of ways to express advantages and disadvantages, and you can see more of these on the website. Here are just a few. And finally, you need to use a wide range of logical linking words or devices. And again, here are just a few examples. To download a copy of the writing used here or the podcast, visit English Online Australia.